From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hi there, welcome to the Library of Congress's digital collections. My name is Nicholas Brown and I work in the Office of Special Events and Public Programs here at the library. It's my great pleasure to welcome Maestro Leonard Slatkin to the interview studio here with us today. Maestro Slatkin is in town for a performance with the National Symphony Orchestra, and we're going to be talking about his most recent book publication, Leading Tones, Reflections on Music, Musicians, and the Music Industry. Welcome, Maestro.
Very nice
Thank
to be with you,
being
Nicholas.
Well, it's a treat to have you back in Washington, since you've been in Detroit mainly for the last 10 years now.
Yes.
And could you tell us a bit about what brought you back to Washington for this occasion?
Well, I was the music director here for 12 years, and 2 Senate terms. And after I was getting near the end of that tenure, I actually didn't think I would take on another directorship, but somehow Detroit came into play. It was such a huge challenge that I couldn't resist it. So between Detroit and then taking on a second orchestra in Lyon, France, it limited my time as a guest conductor. So somehow dates never quite worked out. I think the last time I was here was even back in 2010. But now, my Lyon directorship has come to a conclusion after 6 years, and Detroit will end this season after 10. And I don't want to be a music director anymore. I've done it for 40 years, conducted for 50. The burdens of endless meetings, board groups, and auditions, and all the other stuff that goes into it, at this point, it's something I think I want to put to the side and focus just on the music making. I want to cut back the conducting schedule to maybe 28, 30 weeks a year, do some more writing of both music and books, and take some time off just to travel to the places in the world I would like to see. I'm 73 now, so one wants to enjoy the fruits of the labor. Anyway, I got asked to come back to Washington specifically to do one piece, and that was Bernstein's Songfest. We are in what is the start of a 2-year celebration of Leonard Bernstein. He would have been 100 this coming August. Not quite sure why they're all starting this early, but they are. And Songfest was one of 2 pieces that he wrote that were premiered by the National Symphony Orchestra. We're also playing the other one, which is a short overture called Slava, dedicated to my predecessor as music director, Mstislav Rostropovich. So when we decided and found the date that worked, now I just had to fill out the program, and I wanted to do another work that at least I associated with Bernstein, but that had perhaps more popular appeal to the audience, and that was Stravinsky's Rite of Spring.
Excellent. I think we'll come back to Songfest a little bit later in the interview, but the Rite of Spring pops up in your book in quite an interesting way in the story of an experience with a Mexican orchestra.
Yes.
Sorry to jump right into that one. But
Well, first you have to understand that the book is a kind of mixed bag book where I'll move from one subject to the other with not much rhyme or reason, but in my head there was. I like to think that if I'm in a conversation with someone, that's sort of the way I would be talking. I can't go into all of it, otherwise we'd be here for 6 hours. But essentially what happened was very early in my career, I was asked to guest conduct an orchestra in Mexico City, who at that time were paying me an outlandish sum of money to come and conduct. I didn't understand why, but they decided to do it. But the condition was that I do the Rite of Spring. I had no idea about the quality of the orchestra, but I thought, okay, I'll go do it. And you knew on day one there was going to be a problem. The rehearsals weren't in an auditorium. They were actually in an abandoned garage.
Wow.
So there's this orchestra there, and we start, and right away there's a problem because the piece calls for 2 bass clarinets, but only one of them is there. And I look and I said, where is the second bass clarinet? And I'm told that he was at the dentist or something, and he will be back for the afternoon rehearsal. Fine. The rehearsal was a real slog. When you get to that point, even at a first rehearsal, you have to make decisions about what are you willing to let go and what are you going to work on that's going to make it work. In the afternoon, at the second rehearsal, we start again, and now there is still just one bass clarinetist, but it's a different person than the one who was there in the morning. And I said, excuse me, I said I needed a second bass clarinet. And they said, yes, I'm the second bass clarinet. I said, yes, but your colleague, the first one, where is he? He says, no, you just said you needed the second bass clarinet. No, I didn't mean that. I meant I needed both of you together. And I didn't see the two of them together until the last rehearsal.
Wow.
Well, so the whole rehearsal schedule goes like that, just insane. And finally we get to the concert, and I really wasn't sure if we were going to be able to play the piece through without a stop or a major problem. Get through the first part, close enough. Second part is going along, and I'm realizing this is going to be okay. I'm going to get through this. And then in the last section, the sacrificial dance, very complicated technically, both as for conductor and for orchestra. From off stage, we start hearing a voice. It's getting closer and closer, and onto stage walks basically a construction worker with hi-hat or hard hat and overalls, and he's singing away.
Wow.
And three violinists put down their instruments, they tackle him, they drag him off stage. But I'm determined, I'm going to finish the pieces. I do not want to have to go back and go through this again. So we finish it, and it ends, I'm not going to say indecisively, but it's just with a yeah, like that. And nothing from the audience, absolutely dead. And I take the baton and I just drop it onto the podium, hoping it'll make a noise and people will figure out that it's over. So finally they start applauding, but in my dressing room, these journalists all come back. What did you think of that? Was that disruptive or whatever? Being from Los Angeles, I can have a very sarcastic sense of humor. Not that you can't have it from any place else, but I had this sort of way to make something seem real when it's not. And I seriously looked at them. I said, you know, I had read that Stravinsky somewhere had thought about incorporating operatic elements into this ritual sacrifice to the pagan gods of Russia. And now that I've heard a voice associated with this music, I think I'm going to investigate this further. And sure enough, the next couple of days, the reviews are all talking about rarely heard Stravinsky music now possible and all this kind of stuff. There were a lot of other stories connected with that whole trip. Yeah, and when you read the whole thing, it's like, no, this is not possible. Yeah. But I did have it corroborated. I was in a, I don't know what kind of shop, not a hardware store, but something like that. And there were two people, this is about 3 years ago, they come up and they said, you probably don't remember us. I said, no. I said, we played in that orchestra in Mexico City, and we went through the whole thing, and sure enough, everything I remembered is exactly what happened.
That's wild.
So there are moments in our life that, when they're occurring, seem disruptive, but and in retrospect, you go, you know, this is really funny enough to want to tell.
Neat. Very cool. So that's one of the things I enjoyed about your book so much was that you let the reader into you as the person and what you're experiencing throughout your career, whether it's in the business side, which has its ups and downs, or the music making side, or the family side as well. Would you mind sharing with us a bit about your family background in music, and then also how that's impacted you personally and professionally, and then also your son?
Sure. Well, 4.5 years ago, I published my first book. Never really thinking that it would have much impact at all. I've always written. Ever since high school, I used to write short stories, and since 2008, when the web became interesting, I would write a monthly column, I would write articles for newspapers, for magazines, and finally people said, you know, you have such stories to tell, and your family history is so interesting, why don't you put them in a book? So the first book, which is called Conducting Business, was kind of a autobiography, memoir, but primarily meant to inform the lay public, the music lovers, not the musicians, about what a conductor does. So how do we study? how do we decide to enter the profession, what it's like to be a music director, working in the opera house, recording, being on tour, health, all those things. And it sold very well, much to my surprise. And people started saying, well, is there going to be a sequel? I said, I don't really know. And then I started looking at all the notes I'd made and realizing how much I left out of the first one. But I wanted to take the second book in a different direction. Mm-hmm. So rather than considering it as a sequel, it's more like a growth and continuation of what was in the first book. Essentially, my family were Russian in origin from the grandparents. My mother's family settled in the States in 1903, prior to the First Revolution, and my father's family settled in St. Louis in 1912. On my mother's side, everybody was musicians, every one of them, all mostly cellists. One of them, one of my grandfather's brothers, was named Modest Altschuler. And when he arrived in New York, he founded something called the Russian Symphony of New York, which was all the Russian immigrants. And they would play for 14 years a series of concerts at Carnegie Hall, giving American premieres of a great deal of the Russian repertoire, but also some unusual things along the way. My mother, along with her father, were outstanding cellists. Eventually, the Aller side, actually the Altschuler, that was the real name. There was a rift in the family, and we have two opposite sides. Mm-hmm. They wound up moving to California. My father's side, this group having come from the Ukraine, settled in St. Louis. My grandfather on that side was a barber. There were no musicians other than my dad, who could be heard practicing apparently by everybody. When I arrived in St. Louis as the assistant, you would swear everybody lived on this little street, Washington Boulevard, because they all talked about being able to hear my father play. Wow. I didn't know his sound was that big. Eventually, he also would relocate with his family to Los Angeles, and there was a competition held for young soloists. The award would be a performance in the Hollywood Bowl with the pianist-conductor Jose Iturbi. Mm-hmm. And my dad won. My mother was furious. They had not met. She felt the whole competition was rigged. Uh-oh. And she went back and she started to give my father hell about it. Says, you didn't deserve to win, that I should have been the winner. Well, somehow they thought they should continue the argument over coffee and a bite to eat, and 2 years later they got married. Wonderful. So with that in mind, they moved in 3 different directions of the music industry in LA. First, my dad was concertmaster of the orchestra at 20th Century Fox. There were 11 studio orchestras, wow, each with their own actors, writers, directors, producers, and musicians and composers. So he was at Fox. My mom was the first cellist over at Warner's, and she was the first woman to hold a title position in the studios. And this is the late 30s. In the 40s, they formed one half of what would become a very famous group, mostly known on recordings because they did tour a lot. We called the Hollywood String Quartet. They couldn't tour a lot because the studio work kept them very, very busy. And the third part of their musical existence was as part of the popular music industry and the recording field, particularly for Capitol Records, where people like Nat King Cole, June Christie, Stan Kenton, all the people were recording for this label. But in particular, it was Frank Sinatra, who became very close to the family. My brother and I, when we were young, referred to him as Uncle Frank. Wow. When we were little, he would take us by the hands, lead us upstairs, put us in our beds, and sing us to sleep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time with him in his homes in Palm Springs and Las Vegas. And he couldn't have been nicer to the family. Obviously, if you were a friend of Sinatra's, you couldn't ask for a better friend. If you were an enemy, you couldn't ask for a worse enemy. So I grew up in this family. where there were not boundaries in music. We didn't think about classical music is up here and rock and roll is down here. If it was good, no matter what the genre. And I've stayed that way to this day. I do a lot of things that many conductors don't do simply because they didn't have that as children. Having this kind of background was in some ways a big benefit, but a slight curse, because if you're associated with doing lighter music, some people say, well, okay, he's not that serious. And I knew that was a risk, but I couldn't be without it. Jazz became a hugely important part of my life, both as a piano player and as a conductor, as a listener, and that hasn't changed either. So I've enjoyed this existence of just experiencing all kinds of music. And it is due to the influence of the family and all the people we met, because all of those folks that I mentioned, and virtually every luminary, whether it was Stravinsky or Hindemith or William Walton or Sinatra or Korngold, Tiomkin, Max Steiner, all the great film composers, right through to John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, so forth and so on, all of them were at our house.
Wow.
And they all played on the piano that I still have. And to us, they were just people. They were normal. I didn't hold anybody in the highest esteem in the world. I held baseball players up there, but not musicians. They were just really good people to get to know. The other thing that did have an impact on me, a little bit later, had to do with 1955 and 56, when the McCarthy hearings were taking place. The film studios were among the prime targets. Generally, people who are in the arts, the performers, the painters, the writers, tend to be a little more liberal in their thinking. The people who are donors, however, surprisingly, tend to be a little more conservative. So you have to find that balance. But McCarthy went after musicians and almost anybody who could involved with Hollywood, including Aaron Copland, who, one, was accused of being a communist, a homosexual, Jewish, which he denied in Congress, but then later it turned out he was all three. And it caused complete chaos in the film industry. All the studios then abandoned their separate setups. There became one pool of actors and musicians and directors for all the studios. Actually, it wound up putting people out of work rather than the theory that it would open up everything. So all of a sudden I became interested, not quite yet, but later on, in the history of the unions vis-a-vis how an orchestra is dealt with, because they're part of the negotiating process. But these days, with the, in many cases, very, very healthy salaries that orchestras are making, I think the union's job is not to be involved with orchestras except for pensions, health benefits, things like that. Unions are good, I think, for the studio musician, person doing the club date, things like that. Take care of them. So a lot of things from the past have come back to me recently, and so I wanted to talk about some of them in the book.
Yeah, great. And your son is in music now.
He is. Now, this is unusual because I didn't have the best luck when it came to being married. I had 2 early marriages, neither of them lasted more than 2 years. But those separations were all very amicable. It just didn't work. But in the third one, after I think 9 years, Daniel came along. And now there was a different reason to focus. But as many musicians will tell you, it is very difficult with this life on the road so much and focusing on career and the hours you need to study and work. It's not something you leave at the office. You bring it home when you're home. So I was away a lot. I fell to temptation a couple times. My wife and I became really antagonistic. Our son saw it, and eventually we separated. And I worried about my son because I didn't know what was going to happen. He'd been interested in music, but only on the peripheral. Played piano, played viola, but we were all convinced he wasn't going to go into the performance end at all. When he went to private school during his high school years, he started playing guitar, did a little bit of drumming, I think. And then out of nowhere, he decided he wanted to be in what's called the music industry, meaning go to University of Southern California and study to be possibly a producer, an engineer, maybe have a management of a bunch of rock groups, stuff like that. 3.5 years into that program, out of nowhere came, I think I want to compose.
Wow.
And I went, what? He says, yeah, I don't want to deal with the nonsense that goes with the management side of the profession. And very quickly, really quickly, he acquired the skills as a composer. And so now, at age 23, now going to the UCLA Extension Division, he is writing music for films and television. He's wrapping up his first documentary. He has a couple short films out there. And I'm not saying this as a proud father. This is very distant. Mm-hmm. He's really good at what he does.
Right.
And I think he will be able to make a good, strong name for himself after a while. He's very serious. He has a fiancée. They probably won't get married for a couple of years, but they're very supportive of each other. And he and I have become very close now. In fact, as we're talking, he's here on this trip to Washington.
Yes.
And he came to rehearsal yesterday, and all the members of the orchestra who knew him, when he was yay high, they just were so happy to see him again. And it was, especially his first piano teacher who was playing keyboard in the orchestra.
Oh,
they had
gosh.
a great
Wow.
reunion. So it's a different kind of pride,
Yeah.
Of course, I realize I better not mess up at the concerts, because if my son gives me a bad time, it's all over.
Yeah. Excellent. So your son, you mentioned that he studied piano. And
Yep.
was that his primary instrument always, or did he play anything
He
else?
played viola.
Interesting.
And
choice.
he actually was the only violist in his middle school orchestra. That was still here. And a rather cute story evolved from that. He was playing viola in the string ensemble, but he was a pretty good pianist. But there was another kid in the school who was a top-class pianist, very young, just one of those prodigies, could do anything. And Daniel, in his last year in school here, really wanted to play something on the spring concert on the piano. But he was worried that the other kid was going to get it because it was a superior talent. And when he told me this, I said, so you want me to basically go to your music teacher and say, would you please let Daniel play? And I said, that may not be the nicest thing, but let me try something else. So one night I sat down and I started writing an arrangement for piano and strings. I guess it was a Christmas concert, that's what it was, of a couple Christmas songs that could be played by that age group. And we went to the music teacher and I said, I know you probably have Ben, the other child, playing, but maybe you might be interested in this because it's age appropriate for your young string players, and it would feature Daniel do piano and I would conduct.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I guess it's a form of bribery, I suppose, but that's what we did. And that started a small part of my career that I never thought would happen. I went on to write 12 pieces that became a collection, and then I wrote another 12, and now a third volume has come out with single line instruments, and it's all because of that little genius Ben. He probably has no idea what he started. And these actually sell fairly well among, more than schools, churches. Churches really enjoy doing them.
Interesting.
So it's just another fun thing to do. I like adventures outside of the conducting.
Has Ben stayed in the music industry?
I
as a
don't think
pianist?
so. I
Yeah.
think I know he graduated from whatever incredible college he went to,
Yeah.
you know, but early.
Mhm.
You know, he's just one of those kids.
Interesting.
Right.
Neat. Where
Probably
did
be a
you-
serial killer now.
Oh gosh.
Probably.
Or a poet.
Yeah, or a
Something like
poet,
that.
yes.
Where did you live in D.C. or in the area when you were
We
here?
lived almost entirely in Potomac,
Okay.
in Maryland. And I used to love driving down to the center because I could either take the canal road down and cut over, or I could go over to the GW Parkway, and I could get from my garage at home to my parking spot at the Kennedy Center, 1, no billboards, 2, not one stoplight.
Wow.
That'll
Not
never
bad.
happen again.
No, not at all. And now they're doing construction over there and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
But I loved that drive
Yeah.
in the morning.
What have you seen change in DC since you've started coming here and since you were living here? And
Oh,
and now it's
absolutely
just-
nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Gee, it's all the same.
Yeah.
You know, I was hanging out with the Clintons and
Yeah.
a little bit with the Bushes, and you know, I'm here this trip. I've been waiting for my invitation to the White House, but I suspect that's not going to be forthcoming. But in those administrations, often the presidents and first ladies would come to the concerts. Members of the diplomatic corps, lots of people from news divisions became very good friends. I think that the Kennedy Center itself, which has so much to offer, still remains a little bit disconnected from Washington life in the sense that when you're a tourist, say, you come, yes, you want to go to the Capitol, you want to go to the White House, you want to go Smithsonian, come here to the Library of Congress, whatever. And it's not the first thought to go to the Kennedy Center. I still think no one's quite solved yet. How do you make that structure and what's inside an integral part of the city? Maybe because of where it is. I know they're extending it out now, trying to build a pedestrian mall. They tried that quite a while ago, even while I was here, and the costs were too prohibitive. So maybe the physical way it connects will help a bit. And I'm hoping that Deborah Rutter will really use her incredible skills to help make that happen. But it's made a little more complicated. People don't really know that your government, your taxes, do not go to the institutions within the Kennedy Center. They go to the building,
Yeah.
maintaining it because it's a national monument, and making sure that the upkeep is there. But the institutions still rely primarily on philanthropy and ticket sales. So when you talk about ticket sales, you're talking about potentially high prices, and that shuts out a lot of people from the ability to come. Even though on a bus tour, you're going to see 3 million people looking at the Kennedy bus and the Hall of Flags and all that. But they don't really go into what it's supposed to be about, and that's making the arts a living and breathing thing. So I remember one of the things I did right away, I went on a tour, for like the first day I got here. I got in a tour group, they didn't know who I was. And it shocked me that we really never went into a hall, none of the performance spaces. So I immediately opened up the rehearsals. I said, if we're rehearsing, you bring that tour group, they stand in the back behind the railing and stay for 5 minutes. They said, well, don't you think that'll be disruptive? I said, no. They'll be so in awe and surprised and pleased to be there, they'll be just fine. And I suspect they still do it. I don't know. My back is always, I never see what's going on back there. But I always thought that was a good start for opening it up. But they're going to have to reconsider pricing structure. I know they're doing a lot of good work now in outreach, at least in the orchestra. Having Mason Bates as the Kennedy Center composer in residence is great because Mason is just terrific at understanding so many levels of the artistic experience. But it really is a question of making it come together. If you look at the other major venue in the country, Lincoln Center, I mean, it's sitting there right in the middle of everything. You can't miss Lincoln Center. And when you look at the Kennedy Center, it's not quite connected to anything physically. So they're going to have to find other ways to make that work. So that remains what it was. I do see a lot of new independent stores opening up as I've been driving around a little bit. And that's very pleasing. Certainly the restaurant scene is even better than when I was here. There's just so many wonderful places to eat. Obviously, one notices the heightened security, sadly. And as we're talking, it's not really tourist season, so the city's not too crowded. Doesn't feel like it anyway. So at the moment, it feels like the people who are actually residents of the capital are the heart of the city. They always have been. But when all the tourists come, that changes the dynamic of the city. It changes who it is and what it is. Administrations are going to come and go. That's always going to be. There'll be a whole new core of people every 2, 4, 6 years. And you took that in stride. It made it difficult in some places to establish some long-term friendships with people I wish I'd gotten to know better, just because they're here and then they're gone, and it's hard to find them. But essentially there's still an excitement to the city, knowing that we're in the place that when everybody turns on the national news and sees what's going on, here in Washington, you turn on the local news, and the local news here is the national news everywhere else.
It's very interesting. One of the things in our collections, we have Leonard Bernstein's papers, of course, and Aaron Copland's and many other major figures from 20th century American history and culture. And in Bernstein's correspondence, particularly with the Kennedy family, you can see when he first interacts with Jackie Kennedy, when JFK was in the Senate, and they have some correspondence then, and then as it goes forward in the relationship into the inauguration, and we have this Frank Sinatra telegram that Frank sent to Bernstein, talking about he called him a genius and saying how he'll see him at the dinner. And then there was the whole story with the snowstorm, and then into the White House time, how Bernstein was pulled into certain things to advise on a personal level about the arts and arts policy, and then was brought in for certain state functions with diplomats from Japan, for example. And then the whole period from after JFK was assassinated, and the letters that Jackie wrote to him on the night of RFK's funeral, which is just mind-blowing. At 4 a.m, it's a 10-page thing, just pouring her heart out about Mahler. It's just amazing. And then how they were so connected later on, and with the Kennedy Center, of course, with Mass and with Songfest. What is the appropriate balance in your mind for a civic figure or cultural figure like yourself and the civic society, whether it's the politicians, the Chamber of Commerce, etc.?
Bernstein was unique. I mean, never before had there been a musician who infused himself into virtually all aspects of society the way Bernstein did. But then again, Bernstein was the very first American conductor to have achieved an international reputation. He was intellectually curious all the time and loved, absolutely adored, being part of the interaction with every figure. But I'll get back to that, but one quick story about the Kennedy inauguration. So Sinatra is invited to sing. Sinatra said he's coming, but there's a condition. My mother and Dad had to be the respective first cellist and concertmaster of the orchestra.
Wow.
So I have photos of them with Bernstein at the inauguration.
That's
and do you know what the gift was that everybody got?
Did they get one of those books?
No, they got a cigarette holder.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, thing like that, it was silver with the thing on it.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That was very generational. Anyway, so we can say today that a few of our musical figures have tried to interject themselves into the political scene anyway. Certainly Daniel Barenboim's done it. Dudamel has kind of waffled, but sort of getting drawn in a little. And my predecessor, Rostropovich, clearly wanted the same kind of thing. But Bernstein was the one who could pull it off. And you only have to go back and read that fantastic, lengthy essay in the New Yorker written by Tom Wolfe, where we got the term radical chic, which describes the dinner party at Bernstein's apartment when he invited the Black Panthers over. That was Bernstein trying to understand and somehow put diverse groups of people together. He truly believed that he could do this. I think it was an interesting time. I don't think it was necessarily meaningful. But for me personally, I try to let the music more or less speak for itself. What we have to do as a performing arts institution, I'm going to cough, and I might need the water. 1 second. I can pick this up. Thank you. If it's down here, you won't see it? Okay. What I think we need to do as performing institutions or artistic institutions is to make what we do available to as many people as possible, mostly through an education system, because since I was a young person and now, arts education, especially in the public schools, has just deteriorated. When I arrived in Detroit, the supervisor of schools bragged that 30% of Detroit schools had music education. And I just looked at him and said, I mean, 70% don't. So I've been working the last couple of years to find a way to fold arts education, not just music, but painting, sculpture, architecture, everything, into the history curriculum. No piece of great art exists in this vacuum. It always has something to say about the society in which that artist lived, whether they're looking ahead or looking back or providing commentary. So maybe that helps if history teachers get a little bit of education as well into interjecting the arts as they go across. Then we'll see. Maybe there'll be an outcry from some public people to have that. But you're 2 generations now where it's just been declining and declining and declining. But with that being said, we're seeing an influx in our country of something quite different than what we saw when I was young and what my parents' generation saw. Our artistic heritage, in almost every way, came from Europe or Russia or one of the Slavic countries. Today, the influx is coming from Asia, whether it's Japan, Korea, China. These are the people who understand that becoming part of the global marketplace means that you have to become part of the Western cultural scene as well. And they're producing outstanding talents in every field. So our job, I think, as artists, are to encourage this diversity, embrace the new Americans. Obviously, I'm, as the grandson of immigrants, not so keen on how we keep people out. Because, yeah, maybe you're going to prevent something from happening, but you're also maybe going to lose out on opportunities. So perhaps the system under which we let people in needs to be looked at very carefully. But there's a lot in this world none of us are ever going to be able to change. All we can do is identify those who we see have promise, who have talent, the dreamers, all these people who will make American life better as we go along. The focus now is on the people who will make it worse. I tend to want to think the other way.
You've been in Detroit in such a pivotal time in the city's existence, and it's sort of moving towards a new potential. Where was the city when you found it as music director, and where is it now as you're preparing to conclude your tenure?
I hadn't planned on going anywhere after I finished in Washington. I thought that was it. And then I was asked to guest conduct in Detroit. incredible hall, just really one of the great halls of the world. Not so big, about 1,800 people. Orchestra was good. I really didn't even know they were looking for a music director, but somehow we hit it off. Board members came to me. We hastily arranged a couple more concerts to see if it would work. But along the way, people were saying, well, you know, there's going to be a lot of problems in Detroit. We already knew that the economic downturn was happening in Detroit 2 years before it happened everywhere else. So 2006 is when the automobile industry was really on the verge of a kind of collapse. 2008 for the rest of the country. But that meant that perhaps the upswing could take place a little earlier if there was going to be one. And then, into the third year of my tenure, the orchestra was on strike. They were on strike for 6 months. And everybody had told me that was what was going to happen before I took the job. Everybody knew this. And that's when I took it on as a challenge. I said, I've got to be there. I've got to be part of what will happen when the strike is over. So during the work stoppage, I was meeting with musicians, board members, management, talking to other people. What do we do the day the strike ends? And we started putting in initiatives. We webcast for free all over the world. Every subscription concert, now our educational concerts as well as others. We offer incredible pricing structures for young people. For $25, students can buy what we call a sound card. We're not one of those cities where people walk up at the last minute and buy a ticket. Suburbs are too far away. So we know 2 weeks in advance roughly what our ticket sales will be like. And we're not talking about just orchestra concerts, anything that's done in Orchestra Hall. You pay the $25, you're in. But it's $25 for the whole year. Means after certainly after 2 events, everything after that's free. You get the pricing structure right, you're going to attract the young people. The third thing we did was to go out and play in those suburban communities, increasing subscribership by about 3,500 and adding almost 6 more weeks of classical concerts for the orchestra. More and more orchestras now are relying on pops concerts and playing musical films, and those are all fine. Again, if it's good, it's good. But I know the musicians appreciate getting their teeth more into the repertoire, whether older or contemporary. So those things that we did helped to spur other organizations, not just arts ones, but businesses, to say, hey, the orchestra's really gotten ahead of the curve here. And all of a sudden, new people were moving into Detroit. The largest community of artists, for example, in Detroit is coming from where? Brooklyn. It's too expensive in Brooklyn. Yeah. So they come, they buy these properties that are inexpensive, redo them, and are creating sensational, really interesting new works of art. I don't recognize much of the city that I came to 9 years ago, which at the time looked like Berlin in 1945. Yes, there are still large pockets that remain burned down or empty and whatever, but gradually you see the transformation that's taking place. There's still a long way to go for both the orchestra and for Detroit itself, but one good number is that when I started, out of the orchestra of that time, I think it was 92 players, only one lived in what we would call the downtown area. Everybody else lived in the suburbs. Over the last year, I hired 7 new players, and out of the 7, 6 of them live downtown now. Wow. And that's a big change. The shops are booming. The restaurant scene has become terrific. The art museum. Another thing that was potentially going to disappear. The city itself voted, because it's a city museum. You pay taxes, the museum stays in business. And the residents of Detroit City voted that they would not allow the museum to fall victim. Wow. Amazing. So it's been a great story. I had to change my set of goals. I had a slightly different artistic agenda when I started, but now my job was just to help get the orchestra not just back on its footing, but really in a more prominent position than it had been. And through all the initiatives, with all the people that helped, I think we've come to a very good place. And when that happens, then you say, it's time to stop. Let somebody else take over and build from that.
Are there any specific repertoire programmatic decisions that you've made in Detroit to maybe tap into the young audience or to grow that subscriber base?
Well, you don't really want to be in Detroit in February. If somebody said, "Where are you going in February?" "I'm taking a vacation to Detroit." No, you're not going to do that. I'm from LA. I mean, I don't know what all that stuff is that's falling from the sky and that's causing my car to stall and slip out. But a lot of our patrons, the ones who are the big givers and all that, they leave for either the slopes or for the sun. So one of the first things I did was start a series of festivals in the February period. They're 3 weeks long. First year it was all the Beethoven symphonies in 3 weeks. Then the next one was all the Tchaikovsky symphonies and all the concertos in 3 weeks. Then it was all the orchestral works of Brahms. And then after that was just a whole pile of Mozart. This year it's a French festival. These go on for 3 weeks, 2 different programs each week, each played twice. Very low cost, but also tied into the subscription scheme. So subscribers who are there can go, but if you want to come to one of these festivals, you can get a really great discount on being able to come in. And I guess the best statistic I can cite is that when I started 9 years ago, ticket sales were at about 62% of house on an average, and now they're going closer to 93%.
Wow.
And it's due to all these factors. It was complicated, but also simple. A lot of it was just saying, what does this community need to make it interesting? What would it take to get people to really want to come to the Detroit Symphony? For young people, it's not the repertoire, and it's really not the artist, unless it's a big pop star or something like that. It's the pricing structure. Can I actually get into the symphony for less money than it's going to cost them to go to the movies and spend all that money at the concessions?
One of the interesting discussions you get into in the book is applauding between movements, and you seem to have an attitude about it that I like and that I'm in line with. But every time I have that kind of conversation with certain colleagues or certain musician friends, there's a whole negative chastising thing that goes on. And would you mind sort of summarizing that?
It's pretty simple. Really, it wasn't until the 20th century when this concept of not applauding between movements started. We don't quite know how or why it did. Might have been more of an intellectual movement rather than an emotional one. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, at the premiere, the slow movement is played, the audience applauds wildly, and they repeat the slow movement before going on with the rest of the symphony. And this was the case all the time. A little bit like if you went to a pop singer's concert and they do a song, and they're going to segue into another one, but people will applaud, and you have to either wait to go to the next song or whatever it is. With symphonic music, it's pretty clear when a composer might actually have encouraged applause, especially in a concerto. First movement usually ends in a flourish, and whether it's Tchaikovsky or Paganini, whatever it happens to be, I find that the applause is a release of tension for the audience. They've been sitting like this for 20 minutes, and now, okay. It's probably inappropriate, say, at a string quartet concert, which is an intimate surrounding, or even at a recital maybe. But for an orchestra concert, there are just some pieces that beg a response. Where I think the naysayer's argument falls flat has to do with the same practice being acceptable in an opera. So, in Tosca, the soprano finishes Vice d'arte, and the audience cheers and screams, goes on for a minute and a half. But not only is the musical flow interrupted, the story stops dead. So why is that okay? But in a symphony, where usually the composer, unless they have said they want you to go from this movement to the next, what we call a tocca, right away, why can't they applaud? Why not? Certainly, I can name no musician that I know who doesn't want applause. We all want it. It's a question of when. Yeah. I think it has to be done, though, out of the emotion it's generated. So it doesn't bother me at all. I don't encourage it. I don't finish something, give a cutoff and go to the audience, yeah, okay. I won't do that. But if somehow there's a feeling of wanting to express themselves, that should be. And on the other side of that coin, one thing that's missing, at least in concert audiences, you still see it in Italian opera houses. There used to be all these complaints about new music. Less so now because the new music is a little more palatable to audiences. Composers are more diverse. But if you don't like it, why aren't you booing us? Why aren't you letting us know how you feel about it? Audiences feel uncomfortable expressing displeasure, but they shouldn't. How are we going to know unless you tell us? I do get letters every so often, but not the same thing as a good lusty boo. But once in a while, you will get a response that's unexpected from the audience, and usually in music. I remember being on tour with National Symphony. We were in Florida. We were playing Charles Ives' Three Places of New England. The second one ends in this cacophony of sound. It just ridiculously dissonant. It just kind of ends. And we heard from the back of the hall, "Oh my God." And then a few weeks ago in Detroit, when we opened our season, we were doing Beethoven 3, of all things. And after the first movement, you finish, you don't really expect applause there, and they didn't. But we heard, wow. But better than that was at the very end, just as we finished that last chord, and right before the audience started, somebody goes, "Hell yeah!"
Oh, that's awesome.
And we loved it.
That's great.
We thought, okay, they're really showing us how they felt about it. So I really don't have a problem with this at all.
Yeah, cool. We had someone who was new to our concert audience here. This is like 3-4 years ago. It was probably a string quartet concert or something, or a new music concert. And this person was a young person, 20-something, very well dressed, clearly very intelligent. And they were just loving everything, and they were clapping like it was a pop concert, and not everyone appreciated it. But I was like, come on, this is their opportunity to experience the art in the way that they please.
But why not break down one of the barriers? And one of the barriers is the communication. It's not just we're playing for the audience and there's this thing up there, the invisible wall. No, we want to know how the audience feels. We react to that. We play. You can sense from the stage.
Yeah.
Even with my back to them, I know if the audience is with us. You feel it.
Do you read frequently?
Yes.
What kind of books are you reading now, or do you prefer to
I'm
read?
wrapping up. I usually have a couple books either on the electronic reader, or because that's for traveling. Otherwise, you get charged a little too much for the extra weight, or at home. So I'm finishing up the recent biography of Toscanini, which is really interesting, by Joe Horowitz, I think, wrote this, And I'm rereading James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. I find sometimes when I see something in our culture, I find myself being thrown back to the 1960s, where much of what we're experiencing today is reoccurring, but to me, frankly, in a much more horrifying manner. So I go back and I read works that were influential to me as a young person to see if they still resonate. And in fact, they do resonate, usually more than ever. More than ever. And I think now, having seen the Ken Burns Civil War series, I will probably now go back and look at that differently and read, I'm not sure which book yet, but that came because this year I'm conducting a score to Buster Keaton's silent film, The General. Usually recognized as one of the top 10 or 15 films ever made in this country. and I had it scheduled for two places, and I got flack. They're saying, well, this is about the South in the Civil War. I said, no, it's not. It just happens to be then. Keaton's character is conflicted because he runs this train as the engineer. He's a very good engineer. And the person he loves wants him to be a soldier, but the Confederates don't want him to be a soldier because he's such a good engineer. There are no slaves in it. There's no Robert E. Lee in it. Yes, there's a battle, and the South wins. Guess what? The South did win some battles. But one organization decided they would go through with it, and we'll do it, but there'll be a panel discussion. The other one said, no, it's just too hot a topic. And I find that sad. I find that erasing an important part of our history as conveyed via art. It's incomprehensible to me that that happens. I do understand why in Israel they don't play Wagner. I understand that. And that will probably change at some point. But this is a different thing altogether. This is something where you want young people to understand the creation of our country, how we evolved, and maybe how we've gotten to the point where we are today, devolved. So I was glad I won one of the two battles anyhow. So yeah, I do different things. I read, I go to movies a lot. Product of Hollywood, no choice. And I go to sports events. I got back in time to watch the last 5 innings of the World Series last night.
Are you a Dodgers fan?
Sort of.
Oh, geez.
I'm a Cardinal fan.
Yeah, okay,
I'm a Tiger fan. You know, I didn't really care, but I wanted to see Verlander go against Kershaw. I'm just sorry that didn't happen. I really wanted to see that. So, okay.
Maybe next year.
No, it's the Cardinals Tigers series next year. It's got to be.
Very good.
It's not a prediction.
Oh boy. Since we've just now gotten into some topics about American society and how it evolves and such, I'd love to go back to Songfest.
Yeah.
Songfest is, of course, this collection of songs that Bernstein composed, setting various different American poets from different periods, different backgrounds, Cummings, Whitman, Gertrude Stein, etc. And with my experience of studying the piece, it's bold in the statements it makes. It's not necessarily making positive statements at all for most of it, but it feels like it stands apart from some of Bernstein's depictions of American culture and society in that it's more maybe realism and less optimism in some ways. I don't know.
I agree, but I put it in a different context. Sure. I view 5 works in Bernstein's concert output, which is what he wanted and hoped he would eventually be remembered for. He was really tired of being identified as the composer of West Side Story. You know, we should all be so lucky to have written West Side Story. But you start with his first symphony, Jeremiah, dedicated to his father, and not exactly the subject matter, but the nature of his Jewish upbringing is infused within this work. Now you come to the second symphony, Age of Anxiety, an Auden eclogue, all about alienation. 3 people trying to figure out who they are and what their role is and all that. It's not necessary to listen to this piece with that in mind, but this is very descriptive of Bernstein as his conducting career is developing. He hasn't written West Side Story yet, but he's written Broadway shows. And it's like he's searching for what is his real place going to be. He doesn't quite know yet. Now you come to Kaddish, which is 1963. Written just before Kennedy is assassinated, but not performed until after. The Kaddish is the Jewish prayer for the dead, where the word death is not mentioned, but the word life is 3 times. And there's a narration in this piece which begins to express the conflict between man and God or whatever you do or don't believe. The first performances were narrated by his wife. One, a woman is not allowed to recite a Kaddish in the traditional Jewish lore, and the text was roundly criticized. It was also Bernstein trying to deal with the prevailing musical thought of the time, which was 12-tone or serial music, which he does for some of the piece and then abandons, and we hear him a little more. But it really is about that struggle of faith, which would then continue into Mass, where now sometimes things, we've got to hear Bernstein's Mass. It's just the word Mass. It's not Mass in B minor. It's not a Mass. It is not specific to any religion. It is, again, about that struggle between somebody who should be pious in some way and not knowing how to deal with it. But it was very much a piece of the 60s. There was a rock group in it and all this kind of stuff. In some ways, to me, it's not a wholly successful work. It was just a little bit too dedicated to the times. But it very much continues now, Bernstein, between the Kaddish and this, realizing that he's bisexual. And he doesn't know how to come to grips with it. That's where his crisis of faith is. And finally we come to Songfest. And you pointed it out, but I'm going to give you a slightly different spin on it.
Definitely.
Of all the pieces that Bernstein wrote, this is the one that is the most autobiographical of Bernstein. You might have been going there anyway. Because almost all of the poems deal with some aspect of his life. So if you're talking about the penny candy store, that's Bernstein's childhood, but done in a kind of 1940s style jazz. Then you come to Julia de Burgos, the only song not in English. And this is about a fight for women's rights and for the possibility to break shackles. Then you come to the Whitman poem, the only poem we know, and came later, where Whitman is acknowledging his homosexuality. One of the most moving songs ever written, ever. And there's Bernstein again. And you go through it. Then you get the duet with Langston Hughes and the other
June
name.
Jordan.
Yeah. First of all, the juxtaposition of the two poems is amazing, how it works. But now you're talking about the Black Panthers over at Bernstein's apartment. And one song after another tells you that this is an autobiography of Bernstein, seen through these other poets' eyes. So I treat these 5 pieces as being, in a way, better than reading any biography of the composer, because they tell you what he stood for in his life through his music and the use of the words that he chose.
June Jordan actually recorded the poem.
Oh, really?
Right there,
Wow.
which is pretty wild, and we have it up on our website.
You,
I'll send you the
you don't have the Langston Hughes one, though.
I don't know if we have.
Wouldn't that be cool
Yeah.
to put them together?
in the same manner.
It's Songfest has an unusual history because it was not premiered as a totality. The first performance was of, I don't remember how many of the songs, but maybe 6, 7. And it was for a July 4th concert. Now, July 4th here in Washington, the flags are out and people are going out and they want to hear Stars and Stripes, and then they want to hear 1812 and all these things. Well, all of a sudden came this piece with texts that were angry, texts that were touching subjects people did not want to deal with. And I believe the NSO was then not allowed to play 4th of July for a couple of years. And the administrations now were very careful about what could and could not be done on this occasion. I'm sure they thought Bernstein was just going to write us a good old patriotic piece and we'd get the preview of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but that wasn't to happen. So finally he put it all together and the piece was premiered here. He recorded it. But I also have another piece to start the program, very rarely played. He wrote an overture for Rostropovich's very first season. It's called Slava. It's great fun. It's really almost like Candide on steroids.
Nice.
And Slava conducted it. In it, there's a portion where the orchestra used to, we don't do it anymore, you were supposed to yell out Pooks, which is the name of Slava's dog, who came around all the time. But at the end, the orchestra does go Slava for Rostropovich, and then comes the end. But those are the two pieces that the orchestra played that Bernstein wrote for them, and I thought they would be nice. And they're coupled with Sacre de Printemps for the simple reason I grew up with Bernstein's first recording of it. The first time I met him, it was the piece he was rehearsing. And I thought if I had to pick a non-Bernstein piece, other than Mahler, to associate with Bernstein, it's The Rite of Spring.
Excellent. To wrap up, I'd like to ask a favor of you,
Sure.
and that is to share with us and our viewers a piece of advice for how musicians and people in the cultural sector, how we can use our position as public figures with art to motivate community engagement.
You've asked basically the question of our time.
Yes.
And my response to that is, one, always remember as an artist, whatever kind of artist you are, why you decided to enter this profession. What drove you? Maybe it was a person in your life who led you on this path. Maybe you saw or heard something that inspired you. If you don't keep that in the forefront of your mind, you're just doing a job. To be an artist is a very special honor. Not many people get to do it. And so conveying the passion and the love for what you do, that alone should be enough to help inspire others. The most noble part of what all of us do is not what takes place in the museum, in the concert hall. It's what takes place in the classroom. A big change in our society has to do with the lack of education that exists in the arts, but also has to do with a change for those people who are people of faith. Music has become quite secondary in church services, synagogues, mosques. It's not thought of as being the inspirational part of what going to worship is. And even if you're an agnostic or an atheist and you've decided that you don't believe in any of that, although I'm Jewish by heritage and birth, I'm not what one calls devout or practicing. I'm just not. And the reason I'm not is because I get to do something that people would love to be able to do. I take these circles and these dots and all those little instructions left to us. They're sitting there on a piece of paper, and I have these musicians in front of me. And I'm bringing those ideas to life. I'm doing what doctors would love to do. I can resurrect them, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but I can do that. And if everybody in our profession would take more seriously that this is not just a job, but it's a real privilege and a responsibility to pass it on, conveying that love, conveying that passion, that's what's going to spread out into the community. Make sure people know about what you do, who you are. Get in touch with marketing people, with PR people, whatever you can. Explain. Even controversial art is a positive because it's something created that never existed before. We really wish more people could do that. You're a young person now. What happened between my generation and today's young generation? We became a more visual-oriented society. Pop singer makes a song, create the video. Kids are driving or doing whatever they do, listening on their things. Song comes on. Are they really into the song, or are they flashing to how it looked? Which is usually a director's vision of the song, not necessarily the artist who created it. I want to get us back to the time when all of us had the power of imagination, as some people put it, be able to live your dreams. And if we can do that as a society, in conjunction with fiscal responsibility, with an aim towards things not going towards the violent end that they seem to go to, sadly, these days, but understand that bringing the beauty of imagination to the general public, I think we will all be in a much better place.
Well, you've left me hopeful. Thank
Good.
you for sharing those insights.
My pleasure.
And for spending this time with us. You can learn more about the Library of Congress's performing arts resources at loc.gov, and please join us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Library of Congress. youtube.com/Library Congress for a series of interviews with leading American conductors. Thanks and have a great day.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.